The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those Knuckleheads of Liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
So in our upper right-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our upper left-hand corner, we have David Delugas. And again, we recently interviewed him and found out all about his organization, ParentsUSA. And so today we're going to kick around just some stories about, just some of the terrible violations that are happening to parents. And, hopefully David will have some good insights on some of that stuff. So let's jump right into the first story. So this is one that's been sort of kicked around for almost a year, but I haven't heard quite what the outcome is on it. But the Biden administration, was some of the school boards, I guess, during, the lockdowns and some of the crazy stuff they were trying to teach, some of the CRT and other things like that. They had a lot of parents who were kind of upset, and they wanted some choices. They wanted to be able to do. They didn't want their kids subjected to some of this stuff. And so they were showing up, and kind of giving the school boards an earful. And so the school boards reached out to the Justice Department and wanted the parents investigated as domestic terrorists. So I just can't even imagine it, that, what kind of a world we're in, where to be a parent who's concerned about what your kid is learning in school and wanting to have a voice, suddenly you're being looked into. The government is literally investigating you potentially as, I guess, an enemy of the state.
Right.
So,
Jason, there's a minor correction to the story, to the intro here.
Okay.
It was the Department of Education in the Biden administration who solicited the letter from the National School Board Association. Okay, just to make that clear. But go ahead, please.
Sure. Well, no, I was going to kick it to you guys. I mean, this is just crazy, outlandish stuff. But I mean, since we got a guy like David on the show who's, really, got his ear to the ground on all this kind of stuff, I'm definitely really curious to hear what his thoughts are on this story. But wow, it just seems like really kicking parents in the teeth here.
Well, probably the overview, and I may sound like a droll law professor, which I'm not a law professor, but I am a lawyer. So really the couple of the issues, one is what Leon brought up, is that the government is going out and asking some private organization that happens to be a association of school boards to then ask of the government to do an investigation or to otherwise hold parents to certain scrutiny. So the question really was one of jurisdiction. Why would the federal government have anything to say about a state, county, local school board meeting? Now, let's assume, for the sake of the argument, that some of the parents at some of the school board meetings were rather passionate. If they violated some law in that state having to do with assault, then have somebody get arrested. Somebody took a swing at a school board member. That's not appropriate. Civility, probably not going to be very convincing if you're losing your temper and going nuts. So I'm not saying that to be critical of parents. Again, I understand. I'm a parent. It's understandable how parents would get involved. But I think, again, from the storyline that has been there for a while now, it should be transparency. The FOIA request makes the headline that you showed makes complete sense. Let's really get into it and find out what's going on, what the collusion was or was not. Doesn't matter which administration, at what point in time in our history this goes on. Government is big, and government has capacity and should only apply that within the range of their actual jurisdiction. So the 2001 act of Congress that was enacted because of the 9/11 attacks. And yes, are there domestic terrorists? Of course there are. But parents at a school board meeting I can't even imagine how that could become close, particularly when it's within any individual state. Now, everybody that's watched a crime drama on TV or any movie, the FBI is called in when it's kidnapping, or it's a bank because it's FDIC, or the kidnapper went across state lines. So there has to be that multiple states jurisdiction of concerted action. School board meetings are a county. They're within one county or a city school board, and it's only the parents whose children go to that particular school who are going to be there. So the idea of invoking federal jurisdiction is preposterous from the outset. Whether or not local law enforcement should be called in because the parents are a little out of control, hey, I think that's up to the local school board to say, we would like security to be here. I think it's appropriate for the school board to say, we have rules. Our school board meeting's going to, by the way, there's a lawsuit of which I'm aware where the school board passed particular rules that limited comments by parents. Again, now that's getting into, it's not necessarily a parents' rights issue, because if you think about it, yeah, it's more than likely the only people who want to speak at a school board meeting are parents of students attending. But you could also be a retired engineer from California whose children are grown and gone from school. But as somebody who's passionate about what happens in your community, you show up and you want to talk. So keep in mind, you don't have to be a parent to have the right to speak at a school board meeting. But keep in mind too, what are you actually going to accomplish? Because if the school board members don't want to hear your comments, they can sit there and, play on their device, check their email, play solitaire on their computers in front of them, not listen and go out and do whatever they were going to do anyway. So the biggest message I'd like to get across is, yes, it's not federal jurisdiction. Shouldn't have happened. Should be transparent. Let's get to the bottom of this and let's stop all the monkey business with government. The word people probably are familiar with is chilling. It's chilling the rights of parents and others to speak up, because now they get afraid that somebody's going to come after them. They're going to be on some list. It goes back to McCarthyism and communism and Hollywood and everything else in our society, our history, that we've condemned repeatedly because it's not right to do these things to the people. It's a violation. So it's not just a parents issue, it's a society issue. We should not ever condone, no matter what side of the coin you are on the various arguments about CRT or sexualization of curriculum within the school or any other issue. That's not the point. The point is government shouldn't arm itself literally and figuratively in order to make people wary about even speaking up. Your ability to speak up civilly and peacefully with whatever points you want to make should never be chilled, never should be
infringed upon. But David, to me, the big problem here is government officials, whether elected or appointed. Government officials are always trying to shield themselves from accountability and transparency. And that to me is a big problem. Because these parents, in this particular case, in the case that we are talking about, where at school board meeting, these parents just wanted to go there to stick up for their children. I accept the point you just made about we don't have as parents, we don't have the right to make people do other things that we want, but we have the right to remove our children from the schools and that kind of stuff and things like that, and take them to other schools or homeschool them. I accept that point. But in this particular case, it was just parents concerned about what they're being taught in the schools. And here we have government officials trying to shield themselves from accountability and transparency. And what do? These government officials try their best to get the FBI, another government agency, to investigate parents, we, taxpayers,
Leon,
as terrorists.
What's next? You speak up, you're going to get an audit.
Yeah.
The IRS is going to come after you too.
Yeah, for those viewers who aren't familiar with it, that's actually happened in our country's history. Recent history is the IRS ends up auditing those who are considered enemies of the state.
Yes.
It's really a difficult place, because your point's well taken, Leon. It isn't necessarily that parents can affect change at the school, but they want to try, and they have the right to be heard. So yes, they have a right to be heard. It is a free speech issue, and they shouldn't have their free speech chilled by the threat of or the actual investigation by any law enforcement, whether it's the State Bureau of Investigation or the FBI or the county sheriff or anybody else. Absolutely right.
Yeah. And in this particular case, actually a parent, I mean, I don't know if he was being rowdy, as you may want to say. One parent was actually arrested because his daughter apparently was sexually assaulted in one of the bathrooms of the school. This was in Loudoun County in Virginia, and he was actually arrested. So I mean, I could understand why he would be passionate in that particular case.
Yeah, that I can't even imagine, honestly. I mean, I don't know any parent that can put themselves in that father's shoes about what happened to his daughter.
Yes.
And I mean this with as much compassion as I can because there's no limit to what we should be giving this man, a parent, for what happened to his daughter and his daughter. Yeah. It's outrageous. Yeah. But what's the solution? What's the solution? I really encourage all of us parents to say, let's figure out how we're going to outsmart these people who want to do what they want to do and seemingly hold themselves not even accountable. Well, they are accountable. We can sue them, maybe successfully, maybe not. We can vote them out. Let's get some new candidates. Let's find somebody in our community who's willing to run for school board that we think is going to uphold our values and our positions. Well, let's vote them in and vote them out. Or let's remove take our student out, our child out of that school, put them in a different school, private school, home school. Let's advocate for affordable school choice, which we like to call parents' choice, so that more options are available. For those who don't know, Arizona passed legislation this year recently.
Right.
And the outcome there is that each parent gets a education account with money in it that the state otherwise would be sending to a particular public school. Mm-hmm. And if the parent sends their child to that public school, that's where the money goes. Right. If the parent sends their child to a co-op of students, that's where the money goes. If they keep their child at home and homeschool them, they get to use that money to make it more affordable for them to do so. I think that's an incredible benefit. Every state should have something similar, because everything we do, look, our iPhones, our computers, all cost so much less than they once did, and they're so much more powerful. Why? Competition. Automobiles, same thing. Competition. Absolutely. Everything is about competition. The private sector, public sector, it's what are your alternatives? And academia is the same, except that the problem is different topic, but supply and demand. These economic principles don't go away. No matter where they are, they apply. And the reason schools have had control of children, curriculum, and parents is because there weren't reasonably affordable options except for the upper level people. So those arguing against school choice, parents' choice, affordable parents' options should look at it this way. All the rich people can send their kids to private schools already. They don't need the government to say, here's some extra money for you if you go to a private school. It's the poor, the middle class down to poor, that need the school dollars that are otherwise allocated to a public school that they find unacceptable for any reason. It could just be bad teachers because the teachers don't really have the same. One of the issues that keeps coming up about schools is there a teacher shortage? The answer is not really, because it's supply and demand. We need more teachers. It's not pay that gets people to teach. Yet schools have the various requirements. Oh, well, you have to have a teaching degree or a teaching certificate. So
Yes.
any of us here, retired engineer Leon, would you be allowed to go to a high school or elementary school and teach math or physics or any other subject where you are well-versed and skilled, knowledgeable? Would you be allowed to teach? The answer is no.
No, not in California for sure.
Not permitted. Not permitted.
And I would advocate that parents, we should get together and say to all of our school boards, and again, by removing our child and using the power of the pocket, the purse and the wallet, is to say, you know what? I don't care if you're certified as a teacher, but I care if you're a good teacher. Are you compassionate? Do you know the Socratic method? Do you know your subject matter? And you know what? I'm willing to let the principal and assistant principals at a particular school go through the interview process, look at a resume. And if somebody is a retired judge or doctor or nurse or wants to teach because they are pursuing some entrepreneurial venture, but they're available during the day, let them come in and teach, because there are brilliant people who are available and willing to teach for the modest. Well, actually, across the country, the income for teachers is so much higher than most people believe. I think we're being misled. Gee, imagine that, into saying, oh, teachers are underpaid. Really? If they're underpaid, go to the parking lot at the school and look at the cars. I recently went to my son's high school. The teacher's parking lot has some pretty nice vehicles in it.
Yeah, better than the ones we drive, right?
Actually, in my case, that's true. But I'm running a nonprofit. Who knows? So and unlike a lot of nonprofits that overpay their executives, that isn't happening here for sure.
But David, you know, one of the big problems is this zip code tyranny, and I think you know what that is, right? Is where, you know, if you live in a particular zip code, you must send your kid to a particular school. This zip code tyranny is that is totally destroying public education, if you could call it education, in this land. That's what is happening. This thing and you raise that point of not having the competition to drive the improvement of the quality of education that we are seeing in the public schools right now. And this is particularly true in the inner cities of America, where a lot of Black and brown kids go to school. I mean, it's a national disgrace. This zip code tyranny is killing our next generation.
Well, one of the things about the Arizona law, and I'll mention it because it really covers this, not only does it allow the parent to choose a different public school, and I believe a lot of parents want their kid to go to a public school, but maybe not the one that's just down the road from the living point, the zip code, the school district. They want them to go to that other public school over there in the suburbs where the really nice houses are, because the schools over there and the teachers over there are all better. Well, Arizona's law not only says you can do that and we'll send the money to that school, they also provide for computers and transportation costs. So it makes it not just affordable to send your child, it makes it practical in that they're going to allocate funds to make the transportation issue no longer be an issue. Because that's really one of the points of school assigned districts is, but the school bus only runs through certain neighborhoods and takes all the kids from those neighborhoods to this public school. Well, now, depending on the state and how the states address this issue and how hard the teachers unions push back, because they don't want this, or at least the unions don't. I'm not going to say all teachers are against it, but the unions are against the parents having the choice of their child going to a different public school, because they don't want the competition. They don't want that possibility, or the fear that, hey, again, look at restaurants wherever they are, Burger King competes with McDonald's and Chick-fil-A. And, you know, sometimes you go by a Chick-fil-A, for those of you who are, I personally like In-N-Out burgers, and you can't get them in Metro Atlanta where I am. But look, they compete, not their menu competes. That would be curriculum, their staff and how nice they treat you and free refills. All of those components affect whether we patronize that fast food restaurant or we go to the grocery store. And, Aldi has less expensive, Whole Food has more expensive. We each go to where we can afford and what we find what we want. Why is school so different? It shouldn't be. Right?
Well, one of the good analogies I've heard of this too with the zip code tyranny is certainly food is as important as you're bringing up as your education is. I mean, you have to have your food to live. So, imagine if the government then had a program where you had to eat in the cafeteria in your zip code, and it would be a government cafeteria and everybody has to go there and you don't get to go to any place else because, hey, we have to have these government experts so they know what you need to eat and you're not supposed to be figuring that out for yourself. I mean, I think most of us would go crazy if that was the case.
And could you imagine, Jason? And if you got food poisoning in the government cafeteria and you complain about it, the FBI will investigate you as a domestic terrorist.
That's interesting. Yeah, there's actually a professor at Clemson University. You don't necessarily associate professors at universities with having libertarian perspectives, but he believes that government should be involved in schools just as much as government should be involved in churches.
Yes.
And I went into listening to Carrie McDonald, who's with FEE, an education expert, into this podcast, thinking, government should be involved in schools because it helps organize. And I came out of that thinking, by the way, that's not an official position of ParentsUSA. It's just his thought was, why is government involved in schools anyway? Why didn't the local community come together and decide what kind of schools they're going to have and how they're going to pay for it and come up with that plan on a local basis? And it's fascinating. And it's really an interesting point of view. But you both make excellent points. One of the analogies that I've seen out there too, let's talk about school, affordable education choice, parents' choice. Most people call it school choice, but I'm trying to change that. Says, let's say you're in a poor school, you're in a poor area, or you're poor, and you get food stamps or the equivalent of subsidies for food. WIC, which is for women and children, allows for funding for food. But you have to shop at a particular government store. It's the only place where you're allowed to use your government funding designated for food. How about education? The government funding, which is money taken from people residing in that state or residing in many states, they take money from everybody across the state, property tax and otherwise, for education. And then for the poorer school districts, sometimes pour in more money than came out of that school district because they don't have the property base, tax base to afford as much as the wealthy area. So they're moving money around throughout the state. So again, the bigger issue, though, I think goes back to what you started with is, why is the federal government involved at all? If it's a school board meeting, the school board should listen and listen patiently and listen with some true interest, because the parents are the customers. The parents are the customers. The students are what the service is to the students, but the parents are the customers. And if the school board isn't responsive, vote them out. Get rid of them. Organize. Find your own candidate. Run as around the country. Advocates have done successfully. That's the biggest solution. Again, parents organizing, coming together, finding the common ground, and realizing I may not agree with my neighbor who's the parent about a particular issue, but we all agree that we should be deciding for our own children. And in that regard, let's get together and flex our parent muscle in some way. I mean, I often think of the movie The 300, or I guess that's a movie, but in literal history is forces battling the enemy have to come together and be organized. And, it's like the wagon train circling. It allows, and the wagon who went off on its own, or the steer who goes off on his own, it is never safe. We need to come together, coalesce as a group, and flex our economic muscle, our voting muscle, and our voice in a civil manner.
Sure. Well, it is funny too, is the analogy of 300. I could certainly see the Biden administration as Xerxes and his, huge Persian army that's coming to get you.
But and by the way, the parents need to put their shields up and have their spears ready and say, and for those, just in case I get on the terrorist watch list, I mean that euphemistically. I don't mean that literally. I mean, we need to band together and find the right place to push back and push back and push back, because otherwise parents are going to become, look, compulsory education laws, it's a misnomer. They have nothing to do with education. It's compulsory attendance laws. And I've represented, ParentsUSA has represented parents who were arrested, fingerprinted, mugshot booked because their child missed too many days of school that the school considered unexcused. And I actually went to court, argued on the constitutional merits. But again, this goes back to plea coercion. When the parent was offered a $100 fine, no probation, and that's the end of it, they agreed to take it. And I don't blame the parent for doing that. I wanted to appeal this law as unconstitutional, and I can't do it in the abstract. Legally, you have to have standing, which is what it's called. But I ended up having discussions with people who were present on behalf of the school board who had caused this mom to get arrested. Interesting, too, by the way. The mom got arrested, not the dad. They're a married couple, and they had a fourth grader who was an honor student, but he just was sick, but not sick enough to go to the doctor. And if you have copays or you have transportation issues, not every kid, particularly the poorer kids and people of color who are poor, have difficulty doing some of those things that the school requires of them, so that it is an excused absence. So they're arresting them. We want to enforce our law that your child must be in class. Why? Because there are dollars tied to attendance.
Exactly.
That's it. They don't care whether the child learns anything at school. They only care that they're there to get the money.
Exactly.
But the point of this is, I'm talking to somebody from the school board, and they're saying, but if the child misses school, even if they're an honor student, they won't do as well. And I looked her square in the face and said, not your kid, not your concern. Doesn't matter. Right. It's not up to you to decide how well that child needs to do in school. It's up to the parents. The parents don't exist to provide you with a job. You exist to provide the parents with somewhere that they could send their child to learn in a classroom with other kids and a teacher.
Indeed.
No, that's an excellent.
Schools get it mixed up. They somehow think these are our kids. No, they're not. No, they're not.
Yeah. Well, that's an excellent point. After all, this is really all about the kids, and of course, the ones who speak for the kids are the parents. But I tell you, we had all these great topics, and we're running out of time. But we're going to have you back on another show if you're willing to come back and talk to you, because boy, we've got a lot of other good topics. But check it out, ParentsUSA. It's a great organization, and it's something that is making a difference out there for parent rights right now. So
do you have time to throw this in? If you go to ParentsUSA.org, learn about us. Of course, we're a 501c3, so donate. But if you can't, but you shop at Amazon, go to the footer and click on the link to Amazon, and you can sign up there to the National Association of Parents, Inc., DBA ParentsUSA, and Amazon will send us some money based on your shopping. Won't cost you a penny.
Indeed.
Awesome. Well, that's great advice. And thanks so much again, David, for joining us on the show. And until the next one, stay free.
Yes, indeed. David, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.